How do you define your relationship with Trump? How do you define President Trump?
I got along very well with President Bush. I got along very well with President Obama. I got along very well with President Biden. And now I want to get along also very well with President Trump.
About Brics, about the alternatives, about strengthening forums in a multipolar world. How do you realistically see Brics, which many are now envious of or question the whole bloc? How do you see it realistically function as a force to reckon with?
I said already to Prime Minister Modi that the relationship between Brazil and India, it has to be very strong. We want to learn with India, and we want to teach what we can ever teach to India. We want to sell and buy.
Perhaps President Trump to speak to leaders in person, and if the talks are ongoing, no announcement should be made on Truth Social.
I would never communicate an action on my side with India through Twitter. I would call Prime Minister Modi first. I would talk with Prime Minister Modi first before making any announcement or statement. That's the most civilized way for you to build harmony.
In a world of unilateral pressure and dominance, Brazil chooses a different path, that of multipolarity. Despite sanctions and tariffs by Trump administration, this man has held the line, protecting Brazil's sovereignty. He's somebody who's now charting a new course and changing how the rules of engagement of the world should be. He's visited India 6 times and has been awarded with 2 of India's prestigious awards, the Indira Gandhi Peace Award as also the Jawaharlal Nehru Award for International Understanding. We're being joined in an exclusive conversation with the President of Brazil, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Thank you so much.
President Lula stands as the unyielding voice of our fractured times. He's the champion of the marginalized, survivor of prison and multiple political storms. His comeback is legendary. His message uncompromising. And the message is, the global South will not be silenced. Mr. President, welcome to India today.
Thank you so much, President, for doing this. You're here for the India AI Impact Summit, and you have warned the world about the fact that AI should not become a privilege for a few, nor a tool of manipulation. How do you think that this summit, and what do you think this summit has achieved for the global South?
First of all, just for the fact of Prime Minister Modi have called for the summit to discuss artificial intelligence, this is already something very positive, very important. Because in politics, if you don't make a debates, discussions, if you don't have meetings, if you don't have a mix of people in these debates, you can't manage to build a policy that will reach consensus to benefit the majority of the people. It's very important to take in account that artificial intelligence is something very important for humanity, but it should be the surface of civil society, and that it could make that the people could improve their living standards. On the healthcare, artificial intelligence will play a very important role. In education, it can also play a very important role. But we have to be very careful so that artificial intelligence should not replace the human work, of the human being work. Because the bottom line is that Prime Minister Modi governs a country of 1,400,000,000 inhabitants that has to create jobs. that has generate income and better quality of life for the people. So artificial intelligence has to be at the service of this, at the service of the growth of the country, of the improvement of the public and private services, and above all, with the perspective to improve the working conditions of all humanity. We cannot allow that artificial intelligence will have one owner only, or two owners. Who has to take over the artificial intelligence is civil society. And so that's why that this debate here in India was extremely important.
Right. So, Mr. President,
So,
would you then say that AI is more of an enabler rather than a disruptor? And what are your views on what Prime Minister Modi says with regards to artificial intelligence, that it has to have some kind of safety, particularly for the children, and there has to be artificial intelligence which is guided by the families?
First of all, yes, we have to regulate very rigid regulation, and we believe that this regulation has to be done through a multilateral institution that will have the size of the United Nations. And it has to be regulated to protect, above all, children, adolescents, and women, because we cannot allow that artificial intelligence could be used for things that are negative, that will cause harm and damage to the intimate lives of people, to provoke violence against people. So we have to have a regulation. Obviously that you have 2 or 3 owners of platforms that do not wish regulation. But if we don't regulate and we lose control, I believe that it would not be good for humanity. It could be profitable for one or other person, but for humanity it will not be good. So that's why we, rulers, we have to have a clear idea to protect society against this extraordinary thing that is artificial intelligence.
President Sir, the fact that let's get to what we've been talking about just a while ago, about Brics, about the alternatives, about strengthening forums in a multipolar world. How do you realistically see Brics, which many are now envious of or question the whole bloc? How do you see it realistically function as a force to reckon with?
Well, the Brics was one of the most important things that were created in the last 3 decades. It's important for you to remember that we have the G7 that's been working in the defense of the richest countries and defending their policies. You have the G20 that was created on the occasion of the economic global financial crisis of 2008, that was created in the heart of the U.S. And then you have the Brics that is representing Global South. So it's something new, because of the Global South and having countries like India and China, just these 2 countries carry half of the population of the world. If you include Indonesia, more than half of humanity is participating at the Brics. You're going to have a good percentage of those that participate in the Brics, and then you can establish a new dynamics of trade policy, cultural policy, and in the relationship between the states. So that's why I advocate for multilateralism, because after the Second World War, multilateralism allowed that we could have the quest of a harmony between the nations, so that we can avoid conflicts, because every war starts with a trade war. And so we don't need trade wars. Brazil does not wish a second Cold War. If the first Cold War was between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, we don't want another Cold War between China and the U.S. Brazil wants to trade with the U.S., wants trade with China, with India, with Russia, with Bolivia, and with all countries in the world. And I'm in favor of free trade, multilateralism, and harmony between the nations. It's necessary that we should learn to respect the sovereignty of the territory, the cultural sovereignty of the peoples, of the countries. And so that's why I am a very strong advocate for Brics. Brics is something new, and it established relationship between new nations. We created a bank, the New Development Bank of the BRICS, that has to work in a different way from other international institutions like the IMF or World Bank. We don't need to continue to copycat everything that happened in the 20th century. We can innovate due to the 21st century, due to the needs of civil society and the advances of society. The BRICS is this hope. This is the expectation that we have. And if everything goes well, I will be here once again in India to participate in the BRICS Summit meeting that is being organized by the Indian government.
But given the differences which are there within this grouping, how do you plan to bridge it? How do you propose to bridge it?
Com que se fortaleça o BRICS, presidente. BRICS will strengthen itself and making the right decisions. For example, when President Trump imposed universal tariffs to all countries, I had a BRICS meeting through teleconference so that we can make a statement that it was not correct, the behavior of the President of the Republic, like the U.S. President, to impose in a unilateral tariffs. And I think that the BRICS made it clear about Gaza too. BRICS also made statement about Russia and Ukraine, because we condemn the invasion, the territorial invasion of Ukraine. We condemn very strongly all the killings that happened and genocide in the Gaza Strip. And that's why it serves the government. BRICS serves for the, besides increasing trade. We had the IPSA before BRICS. IPSA was India, Brazil, and South Africa. IPSA.
Right,
IPSA.
but
I said already to Prime Minister Modi that the relationship between Brazil and India, it has to be very strong. I made the first strategic agreement between Brazil and India in my first term. And now in this trip here, I want to reinforce my relationship with India. We're bringing 300 businessmen and women from Brazil. There's more than 300 businessmen and women from India in the business forum tomorrow that will meet. Our cultural, political, trade, and economic relationship to be very strong. We want to learn with India, and we want to teach what we can ever teach to India. We want to sell and buy. We want to show our experience of our companies with the Indian companies to make joint ventures and partnerships. Brazil can have only $15 billion of foreign trade with India. We need to get to $30–40 billion of trade because of the size of our countries and the economy.
And are you quantifying it, that this is the amount that will come with the business delegation that has come?
40 bilhões? Well, no one cannot buy what it does not know. So, when I decided to come to India and bring a big business delegation, strong delegation, is because we are highly interested to learn with the evolution that India is having on the space industry, on the defense industry, on the pharmaceutical industry. India has a lot to teach us, and we want to learn and exchange experiences. And for Brazil, because Brazil is also a great consumer market. Brazil is the only country in the world that has more than 100 million inhabitants, that has a single national health system, that has a purchasing power that is extraordinary for medication and pharmaceuticals to treat the health of the people, the government procurement. And we want India to get to know our potential so that the business sector of India could feel comfortable to make investments in Brazil or to build partnerships. Our Embraer aircraft manufacturing company is going to open a manufacturing aircraft plant in India. This is what has to happen between Brazil and India. We just can't rely on the U.S. or rely only on China. We want that our economies grow because if they grow, the trade flow will also grow, and it's going to be good for India, and it's going to be good for Brazil. And so we're the two largest democracies of the global south. And so we have to give good examples. And since my relationship with Prime Minister Modi is a very good relationship, it's very good, and I respect tremendously the governance of his administration. And I am sure that he also respects my governance in Brazil. And so we have to take advantage of this moment to make things happen, make it happen.
So, Mr. President,
President,
let's be more specific. Can BRICS then de-dollarize the global economy?
She means the US dollar.
well, let me say something to you. I respect very much the decisions that are made by the countries. I advocated that it's not necessary that a trade agreement between Brazil and India would have to be done with US dollars. What I defend is that we can use our own currencies. It's difficult. Yes, it is difficult, but we can try. No one has to rely on the dollar, but you can't also undo this system overnight. You have to take into account the difficulties of each nation. What I believe in concrete terms is that many goods, I'm not thinking about this now. For a long time I've been thinking about this. My first term in Brazil, we established with Argentina the purchase from small enterprises in Brazilian currency and Argentinian currency. This is a process that we have to discuss. What is more advantageous for a country, for Brazil, and what is more advantageous for each country that negotiates with other countries? Obviously, I understand the reasons of the Americans that they don't want to create other currencies because the dollar is the world currency, the strongest currency that we have in the world. And so I understand their concern. The bottom line is that they took over the strength of the dollar and they created an international currency that impacts any country. So we have also to take into account how we're going to do this. It's not a fantasy. It's not something that you can do overnight, but it's something that we have to start to think it over, and that Brazil and India could make their trade. Do we need the dollar? That's the question that we have to ask. Or can we exchange the trade with our own currencies? And so our business sector, everybody has to think about that, and let's see what is the best for us. We do not have to be locked of things to the past. Let's try to innovate and move to the future to see if it improves the living standards of our people. If it's not to improve the living standard, we won't do anything, but I believe it can improve our living standard.
Okay, that's a very important one, but you're talking national currencies and not a BRICS currency, something India is has not been very keen on or has been rather reluctant about.
No one proposed to create the BRICS currency. This is not the proposal. In no moment we said that we were going to create a currency. I think it was the Americans that mentioned that during President Biden's administration. What we want is to see, is it possible to negotiate with China with Brazilian currency and with the Chinese currency? Is it possible to negotiate with Europe using European currency as a reference? That's it. If it is possible, and if our central banks, our Federal Reserves, and our finance ministries understand that this is possible and it could bring an advantage to the countries, and then you start to put in practice to see if this works.
Okay.
Only that. But there's no debates within the BRICS to create a new currency, the BRICS currency.
Okay.
Muito bem.
Mr. President, we'll shift focus now to Donald Trump, U.S. President.
Absolutely. But just before that, Maria, I'd like to just go back to your part of the world, your region, known as a very peaceful region, now looking at a bit of trouble. Your backyard is being threatened. Your country has been threatened by Trump administration, by President Trump himself. How do you see the action of America in Venezuela? You have interests there. Are you looking at going back with oil in Venezuela? How do you look at what has happened in your backyard?
Venezuela e outros. Brazil's position is very clear. It was clear in our position when Russia invaded Ukraine, which we condemned, as in Gaza, and it is very clear now for Venezuela too. We cannot accept that a head of state of one country could invade another country and capture the president. This is unacceptable. There's no explanation for this, and it's not acceptable. Now, Maduro is arrested, and now let's see, to consolidate the democratic process in Venezuela, that this is the interest of what matters now, is to reestablish democracy in Venezuela. That's the most important thing. And I believe that if Maduro has to be tried, he has to be tried in his country, not a trial abroad. It's not acceptable. The interference of one nation over the nation of another nation. In the 60s, Latin America suffered many military coups d'etat. Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil. All of them suffered military coups. And those that had influence was the American embassies of these countries in Latin America that had a lot of influence. There was no tradition of demilitarization. So Venezuela was a negative experience. And I hope that the issue in Venezuela could be solved by the people of Venezuela, and not by foreign interference of any other country. It has to be solved by the people of Venezuela.
Então, how serious do you evaluate this threat? Who do you think could be next? Cuba, Colombia. Is this threat real?
Or Brazil, for that matter, because he's threatened you too.
Brazil. We do not want a confrontation with the U.S., neither with Uruguay. That's the smallest country in South America, and even with the smallest island in the world. What we want is to establish a relationship in a very civilized way, respecting the sovereignty of each country, respecting the culture and the way of being of each country, and that we should have a negotiation where the two could win, could be a win-win game for both sides. And that's how I see President Trump. And that's how I see him. Brazil does not feel threatened. And so when Brazil received the tariffs, the imposed tariffs, we answered, and I wrote an article for the New York Times showing the mistake of those tariffs that were imposed on Brazil. And now I am scheduling a person-to-person conversation with President Trump so we can look eye to eye and settle the matters between Brazil and the U.S. Brazil is willing to negotiate with all the countries in the world. I want to treat the U.S. as I treat India, as I treat China, as I treat any country in the world. I have no preference. I want to negotiate the interests of my state, my country, respecting the interests of the other state or the other government. So in my conversation with Trump, I want to negotiate the issue of fight organized crime and drug trafficking. That's what I want to discuss with him. That's one thing. And I'm going to take a proposal to President Trump on this issue. I also want to negotiate with him the critical minerals and rare earth issue. Brazil has a lot of critical minerals and rare earth, but we don't want to transform Brazilian territory into a sanctuary of humanity. I want to prefer to negotiate in a sovereign way that the transformation process of these critical minerals should be processed and exported in our country, inside our country, and not outside our country. And we'll sell it to whoever we wish to sell. We do not accept to be imposed in position. These things can only be solved in around a negotiation table. And it's not by the bureaucracy that will solve this. There has to be two heads of state, have to sit closely, look to the eye, each one looking eye to eye, person to person, and say whatever they think. This is what's going to happen between me and Trump. We're free to say, I respect everybody, and I enjoy to be respected too.
That's a very strong message, not just to President Trump, to the world, but to your people as well, that you want critical minerals to be produced and to finally be manufactured into a final product within Brazil. Having said that, let's then talk about President Trump and your relationship with him. From I have no relationship with Trump to a meeting to now you're headed to the United States of America probably next month. How do you define your relationship with Trump? How do you define President Trump?
Well, I would like to say something that is very serious. I got along very well with President Bush. I got along very well with President Obama. I got along very well with President Biden. And now I want to get along also very well with President Trump. The relationship between Brazil and the U.S. has more than 200 years of existence, diplomatic relations. And I want to continue to be a strong relationship. That's what I want. With the freedom that the U.S. wants for them and the freedom that I wish for Brazil. Brazil has a trade with the U.S. of $80 billion. $40 billion that Brazil exports and $40 billion that we import from the U.S. And there's a surplus in the trade for the U.S. The U.S. represents only 12% of the Brazilian trade balance. Of these 12%, 22% receive the tariffs from Trump. It's not the end of the world. And we did not apply the reciprocity law because we believe in the capacity to negotiate from the Brazilian side. I have my chancellor with me, I have my finance minister, and I have the vice president of the republic that are negotiating with the U.S. Trump administration. And I proposed to him a meeting, person to person in March. Let's see what will be the date so that we can put things on the table, the issues on the table, and reach the agreement that we have to make. At any level, there's nothing forbidden issue to discuss with President Trump on trade matters. What I cannot put in discussion is my sovereignty and the democracy in Brazil. This is something that belongs to me and my people. But from the trade viewpoint, I'm willing to negotiate with the U.S. as I'm going to negotiate tomorrow with Prime Minister Modi. I came here to discuss with Prime Minister Modi what is good for Brazil and for India in our relation. What can Brazil buy from India and sell to India? What our business sector can build partnerships? Because this is what's important for the people. What will the people gain with all this, with these things? It's not just coming from the U.S. It cannot only the U.S. win to be the winner only alone. What we want, and that's why we advocate multilateralism.
Mr. President, one sense is certainly that there is some kind of weaponization of tariffs by the U.S. president. You said that you had great equations with former President Bush. Is it difficult to negotiate with Donald Trump?
I haven't started a negotiation with him yet. We had 2 phone calls, conversations, and we have a person-to-person conversation in Malaysia. Now, I want to go to the U.S. because since he started in Venezuela saying that he wanted to fight organized crime, drug trafficking very well. I also want to fight it. And I said it to him, a relationship of Brazilians that were smuggling gasoline to Brazil. And this citizen, this criminal, lives in Miami. And I even took a photograph of the house of this criminal that lives in Miami. If we're going to fight drug trafficking, send it back to Brazil, these criminals, Brazilian criminals that are living in the States, back to Brazil, so that they could be put on trial in Brazil. We have a federal police that is very specialized. We have a internal tax revenue service that is very well prepared. And we want to sit down with the DOJ, with the revenue authority, tax and revenue authorities in the U.S., and let's fight drug trafficking. Yes, let's do it together. And so this proposal, I want to take it in writing form to President Trump, because I'm afraid that the wind can blow the words. So I'm going to take it in writing. Everything that I'm going to talk with President Trump, I'll take it in writing. I'm optimistic with this conversation with President Trump.
President, sir, the fact that when we interviewed President Putin, he said that President Trump is very different when he's in his private space and talking to a leader, and very different when he's talking to the world. What's your experience?
I had already the opportunity to watch. Trump is an expert in marketing. He is an expert of the digital and social media. It's very clear that he does this like a TV show, and in the personal meeting, he's much more calmer and shows great tranquility. So I want to benefit from this personal moment, this person-to-person, the tranquility that two heads of state should have when they're together. I'm 80 years old, and he's going to be 80 now next June. So two men of 80 years of age do not need to fight. We don't have to put up a showcase. We have to deal seriously that the age that we have imposes on us, and to reach an agreement that could be a show as a role model to the world. We are the two largest democracies of that part of the world. And so we have to give an example at all levels. The only thing that I know is that I don't want war. My theory is the theory of Mahatma Gandhi, that managed to win and achieve independence of this giant called India through the example, showing an example, motivating the people that India would have to be free. This is the example, the role model of my life is Gandhi. This is the example of things that have to happen. Brazil has no vocation to go to war. We have already many domestic issues. When I took office in 2003, President Bush invited me to participate in the war on Iraq. And I told President Bush that I never met Saddam Hussein. Iraq was located 14,000 kilometers away from Brazil, and that my war was against hunger. We had 54 million Brazilians in hunger in Brazil. We ended with the hunger in Brazil. I stayed 15 years out of power. When I came back now, we had again 34 million people in hunger in Brazil. Again, in 2.5 years of my third term now, we ended with the hunger again in Brazil. This is my war that I want to wage against inequality, inequality of race, of economic inequality, gender inequality. And now another fight I picked up now, another fight that I'm going to pick up, that is to fight against murders of women, female murders, and violence against women. I'm going to fight against that. And I've been saying that the priest has to start at Mass talking about that there should be no violence against women. The pastor in his church has to start the service talking about against violence. The trade union leader will go to the plant gate, demand more wages. He also has to talk about the violence against women, because we, the men, are the ones that practice violence against women. And the women were not be made to be beaten by men and not can be treated as an object. Women in the 21st century, they demand respect. They want equality. They want to participate in the political life of the country. And they're not inferior to vis-a-vis to anyone else. So this is my fight against inequality. Any kind of inequality.
Mr. President, we'll talk about your legacy in just a bit during the course of this interview. You have invoked Mahatma Gandhi. He's the father of our nation, and you've also said that there's need for mutual respect. Do you get this sense that, given the uncertain times that we are living in, a lot of announcements are coming on social media, Truth Social to be specific in case of President Trump?
Well, I believe that what we call social media is something that has not much social that we see in the digital networks. There's a negative side on the digital networks that are people with bad faith, that not goodwill, that use that media, and the lies prevail, evil stuff prevail, and that's why we defend the regulation, the platforms. And the platform, when they publicize something of violence against any person, it has to be punished and put on trial by regulatory framework. Otherwise, we won't manage to deal with the problem. We now in Brazil forbidden mobile phones in the schools for the kids. It was an extraordinary gain for education. The children now started to talk with each other. They started to play again at the school, play soccer again in the school, because it's meaningless for a classroom have children using mobile phones. Neither the teacher will manage to teach, neither the student will manage to learn. So we have this a strong decision that was made in Brazil that we want that democracy should be exercised in the real world and also in the digital world. So that we advocate for regulating the social media.
So would you want perhaps President Trump to speak to leaders in person, and if the talks are ongoing, no announcement should be made on Truth Social?
Well, I believe that the behavior of two heads of state, I would never communicate an action on my side with India through Twitter. I would call Prime Minister Modi first. I would talk with Prime Minister Modi first before making any announcement or statement. That's the most civilized way for you to build harmony. It's the most civilized way. You can't be caught by surprise with unexpected news because someone made a decision against your country. What the correct is to set up a meeting and for you send your foreign affairs ministers to talk first, because the world is very nervous. And there's an absence of leadership in many parts of the world. We lack leaders. We see that we should guarantee the democratic process, and these institutions are being discredited because they don't guarantee. The UN is being discredited. More than 20 years that Brazil created the G4. We defended that Brazil, India, Germany, and Japan should be permanent members of the UN Security Council. Never. No one made any move for other countries to participate. And so the UN now is weakened. And even the permanent members of the UN Security Council, Trump, Xi Jinping, Putin, Macron, and the UK, they don't talk between themselves, amongst themselves. There was no heads of state meeting to end with a war in Russia and Ukraine. you discuss at the ambassador level
Right.
at the Security Council. And so it would be necessary that the UN should be strengthened again so that the UN could coordinate any kind of conflict existing around the world.
President, sir, we'll come to the UN reforms. It's very important. You've picked up a very important subject. But before that, I'd just like to go back and say that the relationship between Brazil and US saw problems in the beginning between you and President Trump was because of your bête noire, Bolsonaro, Jair Bolsonaro, the trial, and him being put behind bars. Is that something that will be a problem when you meet President Trump again?
Deixa eu falar uma coisa, nós não somos mais velhos.
We're not older.
Você sabe o que eu acho?
You know what I think?
Eu não consigo evitar
That I can't manage to avoid
o passado dos anos.
the years that have been passing. There's no way to avoid that, bypass that, past that. But I don't want to get old. I'm not aging. And because it only gets aging those that have no cause to fight for. Those that have a cause to fight for will never age.
Eu levanto todo dia,
I wake up every day in the morning
sabe, com a mesma disposição
with the
de
same
lutar,
willingness
como
and
tinha 30
to
anos.
fight as I had when I woke up at 30 years of age. Every day.
Eu tenho uma causa
Because I have a cause for my life that I have to fight. I want to prove that it's not normal. The world spent $2 trillion and $400 billion in weapons, in arms.
10% disso para acabar com a fome.
And they could spend only 10% of what they spend manufacturing weapons to end the hunger in the world.
Eu quero provar que não
I
é
want to
normal
prove that it's not normal
o aumento da violência
an
contra
increase
mulheres e
of
contra
violence
crianças.
against women and children.
Eu quero provar que
I
não é
also
normal,
want to prove that it's not normal
sabe, o estímulo à violência contra crianças e
stimuli
adolescentes nas redes digitais.
of violence to children in the digital network and the social media. Every day, I wake up motivated to fight against all these issues. So I'm not aging. Every day, I wake up with the same motivation, the same trend. And this is what I want to talk with President Trump. A country of the size of the U.S., from the military technological viewpoint, cannot threaten everybody every day. It has to have the peace, because the world is in need of peace. And the world needs tranquility and peace. We have millions and millions of human beings that still don't have electricity. And we're talking about wars? No, I want peace. I want that India's economy grow, and it's possible to make the Brazilian economy grow, and we can only grow if we have peace. Peace to study, peace to raise your family, peace to create jobs, and peace to build
But how
new
will you
agreements.
navigate,
Como é que você vai
the
navegar?
Bolsonaro question with President Trump?
Como é que vai ser isso, presidente?
O problema do
The issue with Bolsonaro is resolved. He was convicted for 27 years and 3 months in jail. And he's going to be locked in prison for a while, for a good period. Because besides trying a coup d'etat, he also had planned to murder me, to murder my vice president, and the Chief Justice of the Electoral Supreme Court. This is all documented. There's evidence of this. This murder attempt. Brazil has a constitution and a Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has abide to the Constitution. And if he was convicted on evidence, and that's how these people were convicted, the due process was followed and there was proof against them. I'm not in concern what is Trump's relationship with Bolsonaro. I am concerned to know how can we establish the relationship, a democratic relationship, in a respectful way between Brazil and the U.S. that already exists for more than 200 years. This is what I want. And that's what I'm fighting for.
Okay, we're being told that we're running out of
Yes.
time, Arya. So
Yes.
our last few questions.
Yes, Mr.
and then we
President,
wrap.
you have said firmly that Amazon is not for sale. But critics often argue that enforcement remains weak and deforestation persists.
Eu acho que eu vou convidar vocês
I'm going to
duas
invite you two to visit the Amazon region, tropical forest. First of all, when I organized the COP30 meeting in the Amazon, I wanted that the world to get to know the Amazon. That's why it was held there. Because there's a lot of people that talk about the Amazon, but they know nothing about the Amazon, never been there. So it's important to know that in the Amazon region, 30 million people live there. These 30 million people want to live, that want to work, that want to have access to consumer goods that the people in the cities enjoy. People don't want to be locked in the tropical forest. That's one point that we have to take care of. The other issue that we have to take care of is that only in 3 years of my new term, we diminished in more than 50% deforestation in the Amazon. And now we're proving that keeping those trees standing is worth more than when you cut down a tree. We're proving that now. So that's why we created the Tropical Forest Fund Forever, that it's a new way to finance, a way to preserve the Amazon tropical forest. It's not donation of money, it's an investment fund. It's an investment fund. And I think this will manage for us to can take care of our problems of deforestation. We have 6 biomes in Brazil, and we want to preserve all these 6 biomes. And this is a titanic struggle. This is a titanic struggle because there are people that want to preserve and other people that want to end with the forest. The people that have the awareness because they are scientists and they study the issue and prove that there's being a climate change very strong in the world. And others that don't believe in climate change. Some that did not follow the Kyoto Protocol, others that did not want to fulfill the Paris Agreement. And so instead of fighting with the others, I'm going to do my share of the work. So I committed myself that to have 0 deforestation in the Amazon till 2030.
Okay, right. But before we close, just the fact that you said climate change, there can be no fight without the international community coming together. And here's where I want to ask you about the United Nations, reforms, strengthening them. Russia-Ukraine war, the world was divided, nobody understood. India was penalized by the United States of America. And now we're looking at the Gaza war. Nothing. Children have been killed. Nothing from the international community. Where do you stand?
É por isso, Gita,
That we are working to change the UN Charter and to make it more representative. The UN for 2026 cannot follow the same standard that it followed when it was created in 1945. What is the explanation for you not have 3 or 4 African countries, or India, or Brazil, or Mexico in the UN Security Council as permanent members, and you don't have Egypt, and you don't have Germany, you don't have Japan, you don't have Indonesia in that council. So you have to put in more people to give more representation so that we can avoid in this way to avoid what happened in Gaza. That what's going on now in dozens of countries in the African continent, coup d'etat, wars in the African continent. So it's necessary that the UN should be more representative, and today it is not. Today the UN is not more representative. So we want to change the UN. But instead of criticizing UN, as Trump says, there's only bureaucrats in UN, it's true what he says. And how can we solve the UN issue? Changing the way it functions. And who goes to war? Are the countries that are members of the UN Security Council. The US invaded Iraq. France and England invaded Libya. The United States threatens everybody every day, and they're all members of the UN, permanent members of the UN Security Council. Russia invaded Ukraine, and is also a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So, if the head of the family does not respect the family that he raised, who's going to respect it? So we have to do, with great force, Prime Minister Modi, myself, and all the others that want changes at the UN, so that the UN could be reformed, and that should get a better representation. Not to allow that Trump will invade Venezuela, and not to allow that Israel invade Gaza Strip, and that Russia invades Ukraine. If the UN was strong, it could have avoided all these conflicts, but it's not strong anymore. So, I believe that we are experiencing a very delicate times in the world, and above all, with the lack.
Mr. President,
One last question by
last
Maria.
question now. Since you spoke about your age twice during the course of this interview, you are 80. You say that you have purpose of a 30-year-old. What's your purpose, and what, according to you, is your legacy?
My purpose is the first. First of all is, what time did you wake up today in the morning?
I woke up at 5:30.
5:30 da manhã. And what did you do at 5:30 in the morning?
Because I'm fasting, I read namaz.
Num jejum, então, por isso. I woke up also 5:30 in the morning. I walked 6 kilometers.
Wow.
In Delhi.
And I do this every
Delhi?
day.
Outside?
Foi fora de Delhi? Como é que você fez na academia? Onde você andou isso? In the fitness, at the hotel, there's a fitness center. And I also walk in Brasilia every day, 5:30 in the morning. I wake up to work out 1 hour of gymnastics and 1 hour of muscle building, because I don't want to age. I want to be strong. I have a compact with God that I'll live to 120 years.
Wow.
And I heard in the newspaper that the man that was going to live up to 120 years of age has been already born. Maybe I'm that man. Who knows?
Maybe you are. Maybe you are.
Talvez você é esse
It is
homem, presidente.
lovely to have you on our network, President Sir. There are so many other questions we would love to ask you, but we know you're running out of time. You have important meetings ahead of you. But it was indeed a pleasure to know somebody, a president, who has spoken to us exclusively today, speaking about a lot of fight that's left in him. He's just 30 or going on 40. And he has also spoken about a lot of issues, which includes the fact that he's not going to compromise on Brazil's sovereignty. Thank you
Mr.
so
President.
much, President Sir, for joining us.
Thank you for this conversation.
Por essa conversa. Well, Maíra and Gita, thank you very much. I want to say to you that I have high hopes that Brazil and India transform themselves in superpowers, economic superpowers in the world. And we're working for that, towards that direction. I have an extraordinary relationship with Prime Minister Modi, and I want all the best for India, and he also wants all the best for Brazil. And if we continue to work with seriousness, I believe that we'll change for the better the history of India and the history of Brazil. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.